John Charles Frémont lived an adventurous and varied life with experiences across politics, military service, and exploration of the American West throughout the mid 1800s. He was born in Savannah, Georgia, on January 21st, 1813, and enrolled in the College of Charleston in May 1829, thanks to financial support from a local lawyer, although he was expelled in 1831 for irregular attendance. Frémont spent the 1830s working as a mathematics teacher on a U.S. Navy ship and then later as a surveyor and explorer. This included serving as a topographer on French explorer Joseph Nicolet's expeditions to the region between the Mississippi and Missouri rivers in what is now the modern-day states of Minnesota and the Dakotas. Frémont's work with Nicolet introduced him to Senator Thomas Benton of Missouri. Frémont ended up marrying his daughter, Jessie. His relationship with Benton also proved to be fruitful for his career. Benton was a believer in manifest destiny, the idea that the North American continent should belong to the United States. He was able to obtain the funding and resources for Frémont to lead 3 expeditions west of the Mississippi River in support of this cause. Frémont's first expedition left St. Louis, Missouri, on June 15, 1842. Nicolet was too sick to lead another journey, so Frémont was chosen in his place. One notable member of the expedition was the legendary mountain man Kit Carson, who became a trusted associate of Frémont and accompanied him on several future expeditions. Frémont's team followed the Platte River to the South Pass, a low point along the Continental Divide in southwestern Wyoming that has long been used to cross the Rocky Mountains. They then explored the Wind River Range and summited Frémont Peak, the 3rd highest mountain in the state of Wyoming, where Frémont planted an American flag, claiming the Rocky Mountains and the western portion of North America for the United States. The journey lasted for 5 months in all. The success of the 1842 expedition led to a more ambitious one that began in the summer of 1843. Frémont's team followed the Oregon Trail route through present-day Utah, Idaho, and into Oregon, exploring the northern part of the Great Salt Lake and mapping Mount St. Helens and Mount Hood. Frémont then turned south to explore the Great Basin region between the Sierra Nevada and Rocky mountain ranges. His crew encountered Pyramid Lake in present-day western Nevada, which they mapped and named. Frémont continued south and then turned west into the Sierra Nevada mountains during the early winter months of 1844. He became one of the first non-Indigenous Americans to see Lake Tahoe, and his party also discovered the Carson Pass across the central Sierra Nevada mountains, named after Kit Carson. Frémont's party traveled to Sutter's Fort in present-day Sacramento, California, in early March 1844. They turned south and then east throughout the summer of 1844, exploring the Great Basin region, before returning to St. Louis in August. Frémont and his wife wrote a scientific report of the journey that was used to help promote westward settlement and expansion. Frémont's 3rd expedition began in 1845. Senator Benton gathered resources for Frémont to explore the Central Rocky Mountains and Great Salt Lake region, with Frémont's party totaling 60 men. Conflict with Mexico appeared likely, and he was given secret instructions to turn his unit into a military force if war broke out with Mexico. On June 1st, 1845, Frémont's party left St. Louis with the objective of locating the source of the Arkansas River. Frémont traveled through the west and arrived at Sutter's Fort in the Sacramento Valley on December 9th. Frémont's party remained in California for the first half of 1846. His crew committed 3 massacres against Native Americans during this time: the Sutter Buttes, Klamath Lake, and Sacramento River massacres. The historical record isn't clear, but it's likely that hundreds of Native Americans were killed across the 3. Rather than returning to St. Louis, in June 1846, Frémont's men joined forces with other militia members to form an armed revolt against the Mexican occupiers of California. On June 14th, rebels captured Sonoma, the largest settlement in Northern California, and formed the Bear Flag Republic. The situation became more complicated on July 1st, when Commodore John Sloat arrived in Monterey Harbor with the U.S. Navy's Pacific Squadron. Sloat had orders to capture San Francisco Bay and blockade other ports in California if he learned that war had been declared with Mexico. On July 5th, Sloat learned of the capture of Sonoma and Frémont's involvement in the uprising. He assumed that Frémont was acting on orders from the U.S. government and thus began to carry out his own. On July 15th, Commodore Robert Stockton arrived in Monterey and was made the commander of all United States land forces in California. He soon appointed Frémont to be the commander of the California Battalion, a unit made up of Frémont's original expedition party and other armed militia involved with the Bear Flag Republic that was incorporated into the U.S. military. The California Battalion was involved with the captures of Los Angeles on August 13th and Santa Barbara in December. On January 13th, 1847, Frémont accepted the surrender of Mexican forces in present-day California with the signing of the Treaty of Cahuenga, which ended the conflict there. Frémont's fourth expedition began in October 1848. Senator Benton was interested in developing a railroad running along 38 degrees north latitude from St. Louis to San Francisco. Frémont sought to traverse the path of this railroad and determine whether it would be operable year-round. The journey became very difficult as the party passed through the Sangre de Cristo and San Juan mountains of southern Colorado in December, January, and early February. Multiple expedition members were killed by native warriors, and 10 others died of hypothermia or starvation and were eaten by the survivors. All members of the party finally made it to the safety of the town of Taos in northern New Mexico on February 12, 1849. Frémont had purchased 70 square miles of land in the Sierra Nevada foothills in 1847. A few years later, he learned that gold had been discovered on the property. This was at the height of the California gold rush, so he quickly became a wealthy man. On December 20th, 1849, the California legislature voted to choose 2 senators to represent the newly formed state. Frémont quickly became a front-runner due to his well-known explorations and won a term lasting from September 10, 1850 to March 3, 1851. Frémont's fifth and final expedition began in the fall of 1853 with the objective of further investigating the possibility of a transcontinental railroad at 38 degrees north latitude. Part of this included passing over the Rocky and Sierra Nevada mountains during the winter months to observe snowfall levels and the feasibility of winter railroad operation through them. It was a difficult journey due to the cold and snow as the party passed through Colorado, Utah, and Nevada before arriving in San Francisco on April 16, 1854. Despite the challenges, Frémont's experience during the journey convinced him that it would be possible to operate a railroad along his expedition's path even during winter. The Republican Party was formed in 1854 in opposition to the Kansas-Nebraska Act. They had enough political power and structure by 1856 to have a serious nominee in that year's presidential election. Frémont overwhelmingly won the nomination, with William Dayton, a former senator from New Jersey, as his running mate. Their campaign slogan was "Free Speech, Free Press, Free Soil, Free Men, Frémont, and Victory." The Republican platform for that year argued against expansion of slavery into new territories and the political power held by Southern slave owners. They also opposed the Ostend Manifesto, which called for annexing Cuba to create new territory for slavery's expansion, and supported federal funding for a transcontinental railroad. Frémont was the target of significant rumor-mongering and ridicule from his opponents during the campaign. Ultimately, Frémont placed second with 33.1% of the popular vote and 114 electoral votes as compared to his Democratic opponent, James Buchanan, who had 45.3% and 174. Millard Fillmore, the nominee for the Know Nothing Party, came in at a distant third with 21.5% and 8. Frémont carried all of New England and several other northern states, although he did not win California. The next major event in Frémont's life came after the outbreak of the Civil War. President Lincoln appointed Frémont as a major general in the Union Army on May 15, 1861, and promoted him to commander of the Department of the West on July 1, encompassing much of the central portion of the country, from the Rocky Mountains to the Ohio River. One of Frémont's key responsibilities was to hold the city of Cairo, Illinois, given its location at the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. Frémont received significant criticism for a strategic mistake in August 1861. He sent reinforcements to Cairo rather than to Union forces in Missouri, who suffered a defeat at the Battle of Wilson's Creek on August 10th, opening up western Missouri for Confederate control. However, Frémont had a few military successes throughout the remainder of 1861. He identified the potential of Ulysses S. Grant, then a brigadier general with a poor reputation, and gave him command of an offensive to control the southern portion of the Mississippi River. Frémont also guided Union forces to victory at the First Battle of Springfield on October 25th, the only Union victory west of the Mississippi River that year. Controversy arose on August 30th, 1861, when, as part of a proclamation placing Missouri under martial law, Frémont declared that the slaves of all known Confederate supporters were immediately emancipated. Frémont did not notify President Lincoln before issuing this proclamation. Lincoln feared that this Emancipation Declaration could push Kentucky and other border states towards secession. He asked Frémont to revise the order, who refused. This caused Lincoln to relieve Frémont of command of the Department of the West in early November. Frémont was given a new role in March 1862 when Lincoln appointed him to be the head of the Mountain Department, which covered parts of western Virginia, eastern Tennessee, and eastern Kentucky, with his main objective being to protect the Shenandoah Valley and Washington, D.C. Frémont's forces suffered a loss to Stonewall Jackson at the Battle of Cross Keys and allowed him to escape from the Shenandoah Valley and rejoin Robert E. Lee's forces in Richmond at the Battle of Port Republic. Frémont's command was merged into the newly formed Army of Virginia on June 26, 1862. General John Pope was given command, and Frémont declined to serve under him given that he was senior. Frémont was never given another command and resigned from the Union Army in June 1864. Frémont lost much of his wealth and assets in the Panic of 1873. He later served as governor of the Arizona Territory from 1878 to 1881. Frémont died at the age of 77 on July 13, 1890, in New York City. Frémont was well known by the nickname of the Pathfinder during his life for his accomplishments in exploring and documenting the American West. His legacy lives on in several forms. His last name is included in the scientific names of a number of plants. Many United States counties, municipalities, schools, and 3 mountain peaks are named after him. Finally, the Frémont cannon, a replica of a howitzer that Frémont used on his second expedition in 1843, has been awarded to the winner of the University of Nevada, Reno, and University of Nevada, Las Vegas, college football game since 1970.